And welcome. It's your host, John Davidsson. Can you believe it's episode 25 of Career Coaching After Hours? Thank you very much for joining me. As I record this, it's the final day of December 2025 as we leap forward into 2026. So I'm very excited for this episode because I want to dig deep into some 2026 predictions. And if you took a look at the notes here on the YouTube channel, I've got some articles that I'd like to share, 8 solid articles that I think are really interesting perspectives and may help us divine a little bit of what's to come here in this coming year of 2026. And so many times I get into discussions with friends and family and colleagues and other career coaching professionals, counselors about what can we learn from the previous year and what should we expect or what can we predict for the forthcoming year. So a lot of us probably have seen our YouTube or Spotify recaps. Those are interesting, kind of reflecting on all of that. But I think there are going to be some trends that we've seen in 2025 that will give us some insight into this next year. And it's been a heck of a roller coaster. But I'm going to point out some tips that I think might help job seekers or just about anybody maybe stay the course and plow onward through the fog, as we say. So let me do a quick PSA. My gosh, be safe for New Year's, everybody. Be careful, take care of each other, and be safe out there. If you're celebrating New Year's, if you're actually seeing this on the date of release here on the 31st. All right, do take care. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or X, Facebook, Meta, other social media platforms. You might have seen that PSA. If you're new to the series, my name is John Davidsson. I'm a career counselor and coach based in the Seattle area, so I'm probably not your career coach, but every month what I do is dive deep into topics that inevitably come up in sessions, or sometimes clients beam me over the head and say, do a YouTube presentation on a particular topic or topics. So it's audience agnostic. You should hear the music in the background help drown out my nasally voice. But if you do think you need a career coach or career counselor, I do recommend working with folks one-on-one. Work with your own person who might be able to give you much better focused advice. And as usual, everything is to the best of my knowledge as of right now. So check your sources. You'll notice in the posting notes here on YouTube, you've got access to all these articles. Check them out. There are tons more that I could have picked through, but I think these are really good ones. So please take a look, check your sources. And I've said this many times, 2025, what a roller coaster, but I think 2026 is going to be even more interesting. It's a bold new era of AI and drones and robotics and changes to the global economy and a lot of question marks. So I get a whole lot of questions from clients or prospective clients. What's the job market look like? Or what do I need to do to stay sharp or be sharp in a particular industry, particular profession, to be ready for a career search or even holding on to a job for dear life, as we see a lot of folks doing, the job hugging trend of 2025. But like I say, I'm going to dive into some of these deep discussion topics. Hopefully you find them interesting. And there you go. If you feel like a Lego human looking at your North Stars, well, there you be. Wonderful. We'll talk about planning and blueprinting here a little bit too. All right, on with the show. And this is a really interesting article from the Wall Street Journal. And so much of what we saw in 2025 was a bit cloudy. So we saw the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, eliminated. So many federal jobs eliminated. And quite difficult to kind of figure out what's going on with unemployment rates, so the jobs report, and we had some delays and some revisions. But some of what we're seeing is large employers suggesting that they're going to be cutting back or at least remaining stable. We saw some big layoffs this year from companies like Microsoft and Meta, and that was really interesting, where so many folks thought maybe it's because of AI, and perhaps in other cases it was because of spending on AI. So I did some writing about that, but it seems like a lot of folks are in agreement that at least in the first quarter, maybe second quarter of 2026, that there may be some trepidation in the market in terms of large employers kind of maybe scaling back or being not quite sure if they should hire more. this no hire, no fire job market that it's been tagged as. And I think we're also going to see more ghost promotions or dry promotions, this kind of idea that teams or individuals will be given more work and maybe no more pay or no more title. And I work with folks on that issue quite a bit. So if you are getting more work and more responsibilities heaped upon you, maybe that's a good indication it's time to renegotiate to a certain extent with a supervisor, with your employer, in terms of what that means for you. We'll talk about that, is making sure you have some career goals mapped out for yourself as you navigate either employment or unemployment. But survey suggests that hiring into 2026 may be a little bit rocky. But, I do post open jobs on my LinkedIn profile all the time, so you could say the right time to look for work is when you need to. Maybe not get too wrapped up about some of these stats. But I do recommend folks watch the numbers. And I think 2025 was a really interesting year for maybe looking beyond just the classic jobs report that gets pushed out, versus maybe taking a deeper look at unemployment, which is sitting around 4.6% nationally, which seems relatively low. But then you've got folks, Gen Z individuals or folks just out of college really struggling to find internships or find entry-level roles, where it's this paradox of we want new talent, but maybe we hire 5 interns instead of 10 interns kind of thing. But I really do think 2026, we're going to see a little bit more emphasis maybe on looking at other indicators to look at this K-shaped economy. I mean, what's really going on? Should we look a little closer at maybe unemployment, the cost of groceries, birth rates, even shelter intakes? I mean, we've seen some interesting shifts in some of these numbers, and a really kind of strange concept. Can we have growth in GDP, gross domestic product, with relatively low hiring? And so a lot of deeper discussions out there from economists and policy advisors. But again, I think it's helpful maybe to look beyond just some of the federal numbers, maybe ADP data and what have you. But I think that's going to be another trend that continues, is maybe we look at more data to try to figure out what's really going on. How happy are folks? How easy is it to find a new job? How much mobility is there for the average job seeker in the market? So that's another area where I predict we're going to have to stay kind of agile and mobile in terms of the data that we see and how we process that. All right, and even like I've said in some of my earlier writings, looking at kind of like how your state is performing in terms of maybe unemployment benefits. So for example, here in the state of Washington, the Unemployment Law Project is reporting more demand for their services, which is kind of telling some of that kind of in the trenches data. So, all right, as we progress, I get asked a lot of questions about career search and how to build a great resume, the impact of LinkedIn, what's going on with AI. Should people use AI to generate their resume or generate cover letters? And what we're seeing more often is this kind of slop versus slop issue. So, I mean, CNN and The Guardian had some really interesting articles about AI hiring, where a lot of job seekers are using ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and what have you to generate resumes, and maybe even mass apply and flood some of the applicant tracking systems. And then employers start to see a whole lot of resumes come through that are maybe not all that great or all that tailored. So it's kind of this battle of AI slop versus AI slop. And we saw a lawsuit here this year against Workday, for example, for discrimination. And I get the sneaking suspicion that we're going to see more lawsuits against applicant tracking systems. And I've said this in the past as well, where employers may have to double down on how ethically they're deploying applicant tracking systems and making sure that hiring processes are fair, they follow federal law. But I think a lot more job seekers are just starting to diversify, maybe look at alternate streams of income, whether that's Pinterest or Amazon or eBay or something like that, starting a business, something in parallel to maybe the classic 9-to-5 employment. I think that's healthy. So I think another trend that we're going to see more is diversification in terms of what are you doing to earn an income, passive income, real estate income. will we need to do that maybe in the future to survive some of this volatility in the job market? And I think we're going to see some more of the white to blue collar shifters, individuals who were in white collar roles shifting back, looking seriously at maybe something different, whether that's nursing or plumbing or being an electrician or something else, maybe a trade or a role that where the perception is that an AI or a ChatGPT can't come in and do that job. So I think some flexibility and some elasticity of what could we do is going to be a trend that needs to continue. As in, what might your next career chapter look like? It might look quite different than just another employer. I think another really interesting topic that I've gotten into with a whole bunch of clients is this idea of just the rise of more degrees and more horsepower, the rise of the doctorate. And these two articles don't really dive into it a whole lot, but I think it's this really interesting concept of, if you are, let's say, a knowledge worker or a white collar worker, does it make sense to maybe even move beyond the master's degree? And we're seeing this trend, and I think it's going to continue, of, for example, physical therapists, where essentially the standard now is a doctorate of physical therapy, or high school principals across the country, across the United States, where maybe the core degree needed is an Ed.D., a doctorate in education. And so we may see this shift to either retraining, maybe the white to blue collar effect, or amping up and going well beyond just a bachelor's degree. But the AI resume topic there, I talk to clients a lot about their use of AI and their willingness to use AI. I think that's going to be an interesting trend, is going on a job interview and getting questions about AI usage and AI preparedness. So that leads to my next point here. Really interesting article from Fortune, godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hinton. And in my opinion, a lot of what the experts seem to be saying is maybe none of us can just stand up and say, I'm not a computer person, or I don't want to use AI. Is AI, in fact, non-negotiable? Whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, an astronaut, a plumber, a pipe fitter, a teacher, can you afford to say, no, I don't think I want to learn AI, or I want to kind of tune that out? It might sound like somebody 30 years ago saying, gosh, I don't think I'll ever have a cell phone or my own computer. I think most of us would probably say that's maybe a little bit outdated. And we could make a good argument that AI is now non-negotiable, at least as a topic stance. And so there's a school of thought that you should prepare in your job interviews to be answering questions about your opinions on AI, your use of AI, and I'm seeing more of that. And I think we're only going to see a continuation of that. Is humans having to make a decision on kind of their stance in terms of AI. We'll get into that here a little bit more. It's kind of developing your own ethical AI policy or stance. But this is a really interesting article too that I think is interesting in that it paints some scenarios. And so if we agree that AI is here to stay and it's not a bubble, and we see lots of companies spending money on data centers and shifting priorities to prepare for it, we have some interesting scenarios that get pointed out here. As in, are we going to see more automation, which requires fewer workers? I think we've already seen that. This concept of factories that can quite literally work in the dark with very little human input. Fewer workers running an AI-first enterprise. Well, we've seen that. We've seen companies literally get rid of customer service professionals in favor of AI chatbots, and in some cases having to rehire the humans. Or scenario 3, busy workers using AI to work better. This concept that maybe even people like me should use ChatGPT or Microsoft Miko or Designer or Google Gemini to simply work better and smarter, more effectively. If I'm a knowledge worker, if I'm someone who typically works with individuals one-on-one. And then scenario 4, innovators and AI creating new knowledge. And one of my favorite examples of this is, a lot of the really creative folks I see on YouTube doing mix-ups and mashup videos where they're taking, for example, old songs and completely re-engineering them and re-architecting them with AI in a matter of hours. It's this beautiful thing, you could say, where it's really creating something new that could not have been done easier or earlier quite so easily. So in kind of an analogous way, if we think of companies using fusion energy, you've got the power of the sun in your hand or in a box. You could say so many folks, in terms of AI, whether it's Sora or ChatGPT, to generate images and sound and video, we have the power of Hollywood right in the palm of our hand. So it's pretty exciting stuff. But one point I want to bring up that I talk to a lot of clients about is to make sure you at least think through what is your position on AI or ethical AI, and to expect that in a job interview or a performance review. And so Hinton earlier, there's a really interesting quote about using AI and some of the ramifications of that. So for example, driverless cars. Okay, if we do that, if we have autonomous driving cars, they'll kill people, but would it be fewer people than ordinary drivers? So is there almost like roundabouts? We have roundabouts, which may seem to slow us down, but may actually be quite a bit safer. Would that be an ethical use of AI, knowing that in fact it will fail, but it will fail less than humans? So I've nudged a lot of my clients to think through, what is your approach to ethical AI? So for example, myself, if I publish something on either here on YouTube or Medium or LinkedIn, and I do the artwork with AI, I point out what I use to generate that image. So it's really clear I didn't generate it natively necessarily, but I perhaps came up with the prompt engineering to get it done, and just kind of letting people know how we use AI effectively and what are our parameters and our willingness to use it in our daily life or our work life. So another interesting topic here, I'm going to try to rattle through and keep this to less than 30 minutes, is ethical non-monogamy. What do I mean by that? ENM. In terms of AI, the use of AI, can any of us afford to kind of pick one model? And survey says probably not. There's a great article in Wired about Quen and how that's becoming more dominant, is the ChatGPT model perhaps being supplanted by more of a Linux approach, more of an open source approach to AI. And I think that's really interesting, because I ping folks all the time, well, what do you like to use? Do you use Claude or Gemini or Grok or ChatGPT to get stuff done? And I think perhaps here in 2026, we might have to have more of a broad spectrum approach, is whatever GPT you want to use or whatever AI you want to use, you may want to diversify a little bit, try some different models and dig in a little bit on some of these. So for example, I use Miko. It's arguably just Clippy, Microsoft Clippy 2.0, but as my kind of co-pilot, which is Microsoft's co-pilot product with kind of a different front end. And then I find myself using Microsoft Designer. I tend to prefer the Microsoft products. But can I ignore other, like here I've started to use Gemini more, which I find really interesting. But I think that's a good read in terms of, even in the sciences, in some different professions, do we want to use different types of AI models to get our work done and share that information? And should we be open to maybe a little bit more of an open source approach to checking out AI and using it? So one size may not fit all, but one of the really interesting trends I think we saw in 2024 and 5 is this idea of people using AI or chatbots, what have you, as a friend or a significant other, or a therapist or a doctor or a lawyer or a career coach. And I've written on this. I certainly have some pretty strong opinions, especially when we're thinking about children or young adults. Maybe using a product like Replica or ChatGPT for general advice on some of the lawsuits that have been generated around some of these topics and some of maybe the horror stories that we've heard. But this is really interesting here. It's an article that mentioned OpenAI has having a new head of preparedness, And so one of my big concerns with AI as we know it now is so often it's free, so we could argue that the users are providing all this kind of data, and maybe guardrails aren't as strong as we think that they are, if they in fact exist at all. And will the guardrails kind of fall off? How far down the rabbit hole can someone go with AI? Will it actually give us bad advice or potentially harmful advice? Is there a universe where we could supplant having a real human being as a therapist or a doctor or a lawyer for a large language model? As large as that model gets, will it ever be ethically trained to give us that maybe professional feedback that we need? I would argue, and I've said this in my writing and written it, AI probably isn't worthy of a board position for most of us humans just yet, versus other professionals. But kind of interesting, where here we have a case where here's OpenAI creating a role that's incredibly high profile, where there's this balance between OpenAI wanting to be very profitable, but also making sure that people aren't using ChatGPT for nefarious purposes. So there's that. But I think we're going to see some more really interesting ramifications for service professionals, the doctors, the lawyers, the counselors out there, where maybe even needing to double down on the quality of their advice, or really driving home the concept of that real in-person one-on-one effect, and how much more beneficial that might be than turning to AI, as we see so many people do. So there we go. And another topic, I almost have to bring up on an absolutely regular basis with clients is the idea of continuing ed. And I think in 2026 we're going to see that continuing education is not optional. And this concept of, even if you don't love AI, or even if you don't quite believe it is required for your role or your work, is can we afford to ignore it? Can we afford to ignore edX or Coursera and sharpening our sword, if you will? And I'd say no. So I tend to really push this concept, and I think we're seeing that requirement, that whether your employer provides continuing ed for your position, well, does that matter? Shouldn't you take it upon yourself to learn more? And whether that's for your own benefit, your own edification, or for a certification or a credential, but this idea of a tactical MBA that I brought up so many times that I created, that many of us are not doctors and lawyers where we have to do continuing education. That's a requirement for a professional license. So I try to nudge folks to consider that regardless of what you do for work, maybe you should hold yourself accountable to some continuing ed. So there we be. And I'll finish up on this classic topic here. I talk to clients about blueprinting all the time, writing goals down, iterating goals, short, medium, long term, and then working on them. And so I would say in 2026 and beyond, can any of us afford not to have a blueprint? And I'd say probably not. Probably not. Actually having written goals, they're in place. And so I see so many folks, well, they have New Year's resolutions, they're in their head, and that's great, but they don't quite get to a sheet of paper or a whiteboard or a journal page or Microsoft Word. And so I'm going to put that pitch in, that if you have ideas for 2026, personal goals, professional goals, get them written down and feel how much better, see how much better you feel once you've done so, and maybe even share them. Oh my gosh. So thank you for listening to my thoughts. Check out those articles. Let me know what you think. I think those are well worth reading, whatever profession you're in, assuming you're probably here in the United States or North America. And what do you think? What's 2026 going to look like? Or are the headlines going to be dominated by AI or turmoil in the job market, tariffs? Oh my gosh. What a roller coaster of a year. But hopefully those articles maybe help center you in terms of what you want to do next, and maybe give you some ideas of how to stay sharp for your own self and your own goals. But let me know, am I on target or am I way off base? What do you think of the music? Should I change it out? I don't know. If you'd like to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. Good, bad, or ugly, I'll take the criticism. musical credits. Take a look at all these wonderful artists. Oh my gosh, where would I be without the music? And thank you for listening. Thank you for rolling through the presentation here with me. Thank you to my clients, my supporters, my students, you, the viewers. What a wonderful 2025, all things considered. But I'm ready for a more amazing 2026. So take care, be well, drop me a line, and I'll see you in the next episode. All right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.